most of the reporters are here.
अच्छा
And ये जी SNT group में ना उसे we are starting sir. Just go. Yeah. Yeah, this YouTube channel.
हाँ I know I saw yesterday.
Yeah, good morning, friends. So if I'll go by the script, it is written that a warm good morning to you. But just this morning, I spoke to IMD DG. He said it is a drizzling morning, and after 4 p.m. there will be a brief spell of rain, and on 31st also and 4th April also we are going to have some rain. So on that note, sir, Press Information Bureau welcome you all for this curtain raiser event of the first meeting of the G20 Chief Science Advisers Roundtable. It is a flagship event under India's G20 presidency, led by the Office of Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India, Professor Ajay Sood. The event is being hosted by the government of Uttarakhand. And to know more about the roundtable being organized under the Sherpa track, we have with us today Professor Ajay Sood, PSA to the Government of India, Dr. Parminder Maini, Scientific Secretary at the Office of PSA, Sri Nagaraj Naidu, Kakanur, Joint Secretary at the G20 Secretariat. So today's program will go like this, friends. First, there will be the opening remarks by Professor Ajay Sood, and we are really sorry for slight delay in the program because the Prime Minister's event is happening. India is releasing the TV report 2023 in Varanasi, and it is an international event that is happening. And 2 days back only, under the leadership of Professor Ajay Sood, we hosted in Science Bhavan Dr. Mark Feinberg, who is the president and the CEO of the International AIDS Vaccine Initiative, IAVI, and they are now coordinating with, under the DBT and the Bharat Biotech, they are now trying to develop TB vaccine for the first time. So these scientific developments are happening, and to let me frankly tell you, because I am privileged to have attend meeting with PSA, all the international delegations from Europe, America, and other countries. I must confess before you that in my 22 years career, I am seeing first time scientific advisor, kind of a bureaucrat, who is so direct, and let me, sir, if you pardon me, who is so blunt with the, with the international delegation that there were enough talks, last 20 years, 30 years, while we were studying, AT&T, aid trade technology. Sir is now insisting that there should be concrete results, result-oriented, meetings. There should be technology transfer. If you want to have if you want to net zero 20 by 2070, we have to work. It is not India's planet. It is a planet of 192 countries. On that note, I would request Professor Ajay Sood to give a brief introductory remarks.
Your initial comments and also categorizing me as the most blunt person. No, that's fine with me because that's my nature, but I think we really need to be action oriented, and that is our approach. So I'm absolutely delighted to be here this morning to interact with all of you to tell you about the G20 Chief Science Advisers Roundtable and its first coming meeting being held in Ramnagar, Uttarakhand during 28th to 30th March in next few days. So we all know that the world is in the cusp of a modern knowledge revolution, and rapid advances in science and technology are accelerating our progress as knowledge-based economies. So this has enabled a huge percentage of the global population to come out of extreme poverty conditions. We all agree on that. But at the same time, you would also agree that technological innovations can create disruptive changes in society, which we need to be aware. So the chief science advisors our equivalents are uniquely positioned in the overall governance framework to drive the policy choices by providing evidence-driven science advice. So please note, evidence-driven science advice is what in the governance framework is important. So the overarching and cross-cutting nature of the science advice mechanism, it enables us to build synergy among various sectors and as a catalytic tool to achieve solutions to some of the most complex, multidimensional and transdisciplinary issues. So as you know that in India, like many other countries, PSA office does not come under any ministry. We directly report to Honorable Prime Minister. So we are department agnostic, and our domain is to see wherever S&T intervention can help the country to move forward and have a global status. PSA office is committed to that. With this understanding, G20 is conceptualized as first time this vertical has come under G20 India's presidency to drive the agenda which we have called inclusive global science advice. So we have introduced this, and this mechanism is a G2G initiative in addition to S20 and RIG. So this also shows you how much importance is given to S&T matters in India's policy planning internationally. So we have received overwhelming response from G20 countries as well as some invited nations. So my colleague Dr. Mani, the scientific secretary at the office of PSA, will be making a detailed presentation on the initiatives and what we will be discussing in the first meeting, which is happening next week. So after the presentation and remarks by our colleagues from G20 Secretariat, whom I must thank, has been an overwhelming support from the G20 Secretariat at all levels. So through him, I would also like to put on record our sincere thanks to Harsh Singla ji as well as to Amitabh Kant ji. So without their support, we would not have progressed so much in a short period of time. So, and then we will engage with you for question answers and comments and your suggestions to take this forward. Thank you.
Sir, let me remind you, sir, that I also look after the publicity communication related things for the Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of DOPT. So I have conducted 2 meetings, sir, one in Indore and another in Gurgaon. So in Indore Agriculture Working Group meeting, sir, India has given a call to the G20 nations to come together to have triple S formula we have given. First is the smart agriculture, second is the sustainable agriculture, third is service to the all to address the future global food crisis challenges. And in the DOPT meeting in the Gurgaon, sir, we were asked the G20 nations for faster extradition of the fugitive economic offenders and seizure of their assets, not only in the country of origination, but also in the country of refuge. So in that note, sir, on that note, sir, I think G20 science meeting also will appeal to the, India will appeal to the G20 science community for similar kind of thing, as you have rightly mentioned, inclusive global science advice. So we are all eagerly awaiting for what kind of advice that would be. On that note, I would request Dr. Maini for the presentation, ma'am.
Thank you, and Good afternoon to everybody. As you just heard from Professor Ajay Sood, the PSA to Government of India, regarding the role of the Chief Science Advisors in bridging the gap between science and policy. I will now run through the presentation which will further elucidate the purpose and need for a G20 Chief Science Advisors Roundtable in these challenging times. Now, as you all are aware, the G20 brings together top and emerging scientific powers of the world that produce approximately 85% of global scientific knowledge. The G20 Chief Science Advisors Roundtable is an initiative introduced under India's G20 presidency to discuss and develop common frameworks to address some of the long-pending as well as anticipated issues in global S&T policy landscape. Now, next, please. There are, of course, various transboundary issues like the global climate change, net zero emissions, biodiversity loss, and not to forget the recent pandemic which we are still grappling with. These affect the entire scientific enterprise that require government-level dialogue at the international scale. So there has been a continuous effort by various intergovernmental fora and multilateral groupings to discuss the issues of global S&T policy and governance, to provide directionality and to shape priorities of scientific knowledge, creation, and its use. The G20 CSA Roundtable is an attempt to build on these existing efforts by providing appropriate institutional arrangements. Next, please. Now, this is based on two foundational principles on which we plan to drive this ambitious global initiative. One is the need for a robust global science advice mechanism which takes care of not only multilateral, multidimensional, but also the transdisciplinary aspects of addressing global challenges faced by our planet. The second is the demand for inclusive and participatory global science advice practices which would collectively benefit developing, as well as the least developed countries. So therefore, the G20 Chief Science Advisors Roundtable is conceptualized carefully with a long-term vision to ensure inclusive global science advice. Now, the agenda for this meeting started way back in October 2022, and we had the first planning meeting of the G20 CSR on 20th of January 2023, and we have had an overwhelming response, as was already mentioned by Professor Sood. All the 20 member countries participated in this. We had senior level delegations representing APEC science policy officers and officers of chief science advisors who joined the discussions. As a result of the deliberations, we could successfully converge on 4 topics, which I'll be dwelling on, for this initiative to take up during India presidency. This exercise has also not only helped us to converge on the 4 topics, but also helped us to gain understanding of the various science advice mechanisms being adopted under this topic. Now, these are the 4 topics that we are taking up under the G20 CSR. First one is opportunities in One Health for better disease control and pandemic preparedness. The second one is synergizing global efforts to expand the access to scholarly scientific knowledge. Third is the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in science and technology. And the last one is to set up an institutional mechanism for inclusive, continuous, and action-oriented global S&T dialogue. Now, the recent pandemic has reaffirmed that preparedness for future pandemics need multilateral approach. Thus, through the G20 platform, the CSA Roundtable, we would like to see One Health as an integrated manner encompassing human, wildlife, and livestock all together, put together. Thus, through the Agenda 1, that is Opportunity in One Health, we would like to dwell on how science policy advice can help the following 4 priorities. First is the pandemic preparedness plan for flexible, adaptive, and timely responses to pandemics. The second one is integrated disease surveillance mechanism for humans, livestock, and wildlife. R&D roadmap for disease of One Health importance, that is the third priority. The fourth one is investing in analytics capacities such as disease modeling, AI/ML tools, and data standards. Now, access to scholarly publication and journals is a key necessity if we need to improve our scientific understanding and also increase the scientific database. Therefore, access should be free, immediate, and universal. However, high subscription article processing charges levied by journals makes this available to a limited section of society. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the G20 countries together produce 85% of the world's scientific knowledge. Thus, interoperable interlinking of national repositories with international repositories and archives is essential to enable global access to publicly funded research worldwide. And most of the participating G20 countries have an open access mandate to make knowledge outputs of public funded scientific research widely available. Thus, by synergizing of efforts through this platform, we would be able to provide greater access of scholarly scientific knowledge to the global community at large. Now, the third agenda is on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in S&T. Now, you'll all agree that diversity, inclusion in all forms and in all strata of society are important for the progress of science and its impact. Thus, strengthening diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in science and technology is one of our common priorities. Thus, through the G20 platform, we would expect a collective statement of commitments from the G20 nations on advancing access to underrepresented, underprivileged, marginalized, minority, as well as tribal native communities in the larger scientific enterprise. Inclusion of traditional knowledge systems, informal systems of knowledge through due scientific validation process. And third is recognizing the potential of language diversity and addressing the bottlenecks in accessing scientific knowledge. Now, as conveyed earlier, the chief science advisors are embedded in the highest level of governance, and their role in shaping the science policy can never be undermined, as they bridge the gap between science and policy. So thus, the Agenda 4 on institutional mechanism for inclusive, continuous, and action-oriented dialogue addresses this. Thus, through this agenda, we aim to evolve an effective institutional arrangement to continuously discuss and develop common frameworks for addressing global S&T policy issues. So, and this kind of mechanism can benefit developing and least developing countries as well. It will attempt to strengthen global science advice mechanism through continuous dialogue and complementing efforts to some of the existing platforms. We expect to have an all-inclusive, effective, and global science advice mechanism in place through this platform. So the G20's Chief Science Advisers Roundtable is here, and with the theme towards inclusive global science advice. And we are going to have the first G20 CSR meeting during 28th to 30th March 2023 in Ramnagar, Uttarakhand. So the invitation to media is open. There will be an official media briefing at the end of the official meeting on 29th March 2023 in the media launch arranged at the meeting venue, that is at Taj Corbett, Ramnagar, Uttarakhand. If you are interested in covering the proceedings of this, you may write to us at the email, that is csr.log-psa@gov.in, with the subject line media requests G20 CSR Ramnagar, and our officials from our office will definitely contact you and ensure that you are there with us in the media launch. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Maini, for this exhaustive presentation. And the crux of PSA sir's opening remarks and the detailed presentation is that sir is harping on evidence-driven science advice in policy making, and ma'am's crux of the presentation was the global challenges faced by our planet. So India is continuously saying that the three important challenges that the world is facing post-COVID crisis, as well as the unprecedented conflict that is raging for more than 1 year, is the food, fuel, and the fertilizer. And these two countries are one of the major producers of the fuel, food, and fertilizer. So to address those challenges, so last week only I was in Gujarat, Gadvi, where the UN Chief Coordinator, Dr. Sompi Sark, said that this is perhaps, after the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, the world has come to the verge of this kind of crisis. So really we're facing this kind of challenges. And now I would request, because to throw some more light on international perspective, international aspect of the crisis situation, we have our Joint Secretary, Sri Nagaraj Naidu Kakanur, who is from G20 Secretariat, for his remarks, sir.
Thank you very much, and very good afternoon to all of you. We're very, very honored to collaborate with the Office of the Chief Scientific Advisor. The G20 currently has 2 initiatives that are primarily focused on science, though science is a very cross-cutting subject across all the 13 working groups of the Sherpa track. If you look at the current initiatives that we have an engagement group of the G20 called the Science 20. Apart from this, we have something called the Research and Innovation Initiative Gathering. So science is currently being dealt in these 2 formats. So what is new about the Chief Science Advisers Roundtable is that it's a unique initiative, and it's happening for the very first time in India's G20 presidency. It's a very good initiative, and we feel that hopefully with the successful conduct of the 2 meetings that are planned in our presidency, this could potentially be formalized as part of the G20 calendar in succeeding presidencies. So this is something that we should attempt, we should try hard and see if there is a lot of traction for this. Looking at the overall agenda, I think that within the G20, we feel that the priorities that have been identified, whether it is One Health, whether it is ensuring diversity and inclusivity in the science domain, or whether it is to ensure that peer-reviewed articles, those primarily funded or supported by governments, is easily accessible and available to the global community. These 2 are very, very good initiatives, all 3 of them, and they fall within the rubric of theme of our G20, which is One World, One Family, and One Future. The concept of One Health is, which Prime Minister talked about it way back in 2019 at the United Nations, and since then this concept has evolved. The One Health approach is very, very crucial today because of the kind of issues the world is and the planet is confronted with. The approach facilitates coordination and collaboration with multiple sectors, because the issues that get addressed are not just zoonotic diseases, but they also cover food safety, antimicrobial resistance. It also talks about not much discussed tropical diseases, etc. So with all of this, with what's happening in the world, I think it's very crucial that these issues are discussed at a very senior level, especially advisors who advise heads of state and heads of government. So what comes out of these deliberations also will be reported back at a very high level. So I would like to again congratulate this initiative. It's a very novel initiative. It is something that India can be very, very proud of, because this is happening for the very first time, and it will be added to the G20 calendar of events. We hope that the media takes attention and covers this meeting, because please remember, this is the first time this initiative is taking place in India's presidency, and we really need to communicate what emerges out of this, because this will be going as feedback, as inputs right to the presidents and prime ministers of G20 countries, and will find reflection finally in the declaration that we will be attempting for the Leaders Summit. With that, thank you so very much, and we look forward to seeing all of you in Ramnagar.
Thank you, Naidu sir. As you have rightly mentioned that this is happening for the first time under India's presidency, let me remind our media friends, this is for the first time in the history of G20, the 4 emerging economies. Indonesia handed over the baton to India, then India will hand over baton to Brazil, then Brazil will hand over baton to South Africa. So 4 emerging economies will be holding the presidency. So this is the golden opportunity for us to raise the voice of the global South. The North-South divide should be bridged. This is the golden opportunity, and he has rightly mentioned that the vision of the this G20 Science Summit should be to have India's voice to be heard on the global platform. On that note, I think the floor is open for, questions. Yes. Aditi from.
Dr. Sood, I had a question for you in respect of One Health. One Health. What is it that India can do to push for greater data sharing with respect to any potential pandemic, God forbid, if it happens again? Because the WHO is finding it hard to elicit scientific evidence responses from China. One is that question. The second is, what, according to you, is the urgency in regard to antimicrobial resistance challenge? Because we barely have any mechanisms in place right now. There are no mandatory laws that require hospitals to report hospital-acquired infections. I just want to understand the larger policy perspective on these two things. Thank you.
Yeah, so this One Health, which you rightly pointed out, has this data as something to be looked at, which will also help not only to response to the pandemic, but also in modeling. And there are challenges, as you said, with one or two countries, but in general there is a agreement, not agreement, but understanding that all of them would like to contribute to this effort. And our hope is that by this dialogue, that's why we have put this in our agenda item, to have an open discussion, what is holding people, if at all, to come forward with this mechanism. So this will be a very, very open platform for all countries to put their thoughts, which I believe has not happened at this scale. So, perhaps I should also tell you, India is also launching a One Health mission formally very soon, where 11 ministries are participating. And so some work is already going on in different sectors, probably more in silos than interconnected. And this mission will aim to cover the gap areas and also see how do we integrate the effort. So in India also it is at a very advanced stage, and we are finalizing the whole concept paper where so many ministries and departments will be coming together. Regarding AMR, you rightly pointed out, very, very important. So our office has supported AMR 1, the first phase, which is which is handled by C Camp in Bangalore. And now we are now in AMR 2. And the good thing is that here all the stakeholders are part of it. It's not only the government, but it is also the private bodies, foundations, philanthropic organizations, pharmaceuticals, all are seized with this. Because pharmaceutical also feel this need. It's not that only the patients feel it. Everyone feels it. And there are task forces in that. So the task forces are have members again from various stakeholders, and very soon this concerted effort will be announced. So we already had 3 meetings of that in last few weeks, and this is at a very advanced stage of concretizing the plan and coming with the action plan, not only the paper but the action plan with all the stakeholders. So I think I answered both, but if anything is left, please let me know.
So one online question from Dhirendra, Millennium Post, is asking, at a time when India is vying to become a global food supply despite shrinking cultivable agricultural land, what new technologies are proposed to be introduced to increase yields? The government was quite vocal about introducing new biotechnologies in agriculture to increase the yields. Still, farmers are not having hybrid seeds of oilseeds, cotton, maize, etc. Your comments, please.
So this is not falling within the today's discussion, though it's very, very important. The question is very important, but it's not in this domain. But efforts are on. It's so maybe on some other platform it should be taken up. But it is something which India is this thing.
Just to supplement, this year is the International Year of Millets. And within the G20, we have the Agriculture Working Group, which is looking at some of the issues that you have referred to. Today, the whole concept of, the way food security is being approached is that there is, back even at the United Nations, the focus is on food diversity. And how can you go back to some of the traditional practices that have been followed, which had ensured food security over for millennia? So traditional knowledge is very, very important, and I'm glad to see that even in the CSR roundtable, there is a focus on how can we leverage some of our time-honored traditions and see how can they contribute to existing science discourse and contribute to solutions today. So that's very, very helpful. But to add to your question, this is being dealt at the Agriculture Working Group.
And if Dhirendra is online, let me tell you, because I look after Agriculture Ministry also. So on 26th January, our agriculture delegation led by our Additional Secretary, Dr. Abilak Chiliki, was in Abuja, Nigeria. Nigeria is the second richest country and the most populous country in the African continent. So through Nigeria, we are trying to launch 54-member continent. And the Prime Minister 3 days back, when he launched the Global Millet Conference, the President of Guyana, Dr. Irfan Ali, he gave India 200 acres of free land for the cultivation of millet. The two presidents addressed. Second president was the President of Ethiopia, Madam Sued Wok. She also said that millet production in her country is till date is 2 tons per acre, and she needed India's support from ICAR, from IARI to increase the yield to the maximum of 6 tons per acre. So India is engaging with African continent, India is engaging with Latin American continent, India is engaging with the CARICOM countries, the Caribbean countries, and India is trying to promote millet as one of the wonder food, and what is called the miracle millet as an alternate source to the shrinking food supplements. I think I hope when Dhirendra will meet, I will give him the more knowledge about the millets. So next question to Pallab Bagla, please.
Couple of questions more on nitty-gritty, sir. Who are the people who will be attending them? Can you name some 5 of them? And who is invited? So 2 separate questions to you. And a separate question for Mr. Nagaraj. It's a science meeting. The agenda seems very civil. Why is the press being denied entry into the meeting, sir? You seem to say that we will attend only the press conference. It's a science meeting. Science is global. Your agenda is asking for global access, open access, and you're denying access to media to the meeting. But it's countervailing.
So there is there was an understanding between the Sherpa, between the Ministry of External Affairs and the Ministry of I&B. So what is being said there in the meeting, where only Doordarshan is being allowed as the official media, and when that same dignitary is coming to address you, there's no difference. Whatever he is addressing there, he is saying the same thing to you. But Pallab Baglaji, there is international obligations, and international delegates are there. So if you allow the Delhi media, the local media will scramble for their spaces, and there could be. So you have seen. So there is nothing which he is saying there in that award meeting where only DD is allowed as official media, and when like Jyotiraditya Scindia, what he addressed there in the G20, he came back and said same thing. Shivraj Singh Chauhan who addressed. So that question has been answered. First question I think you should answer.
Yeah. So We have confirmation from 18 international partners, and many of them are at CSA or equivalent level. For example, UK Foreign Ministry President Charlotte Watts is coming. She is attending that. Then South Africa National Innovation Council President is attending. And at a minister's level, vice minister's level from Brazil is attending. So there are many people who are attending at CSA level. So the total participation is by 18 countries. Does that, and Shambhuji has also answered your first part of your question. Correct. So there was some issues with the dates, and we are in touch. So we don't know. Now it's bit getting late. It may or may not be him, but because there is a some travel issues which we have no control on. Yes. You want to add?
I think that question of participation by media has already been answered. But kindly note that, within the G20, there are two formats of meetings. One is the G2G format, and one is the format of engagement groups. So, for the current CSR roundtable, it's a new format. So, what happens within the roundtable definitely will be at a G2G level. But post-conference, naturally, there will be a briefing, and what has been discussed within the briefing will be communicated to the media. I think there was an open invitation to media to participate. So I think without the media's help, I don't think we will be able to communicate any discussions that have taken place in the G2G format. Our whole idea is dissemination. Science is for the people. But this is not to to say that media is not being allowed. Media is allowed, and we are proactively inviting you to come. Please do find some time, but I presume the deliberations definitely will happen in a closed door format. But after the meeting is over, there will be a full briefing of what was raised, what was discussed. Thank you.
Professor
Sagar Kulkarni from PTA, then
Professor Sood, do we expect any actionable document at the end of the meeting which you will give to the heads of state?
Answer is yes, and that is the goal. So in March meeting, all these things will be discussed, and some homework is given to the countries, not homework, but points to ponder over. And in August meeting, we will have the statements.
Professor Ajay Sood, namaskar. Here, it is not clear to me, the 3 days, the action paper, how many papers will be submitted so that it will be take action for the outcome of this?
So there are there are 4 agenda points. On each agenda point, the way it goes is there is a brief presentation, and then all the participants, all the foreign participants, delegates, they make intervention, all of them, without any exception. They are noted, what is their point of view and what is their take. We don't know their take actually, right? So that will be put on the table, and then we have also invited some experts from India who are not part of government from PSA office. They will also make their intervention. Based on all that, we will try to come. So there is no paper which will be issued by any international delegate. Yes, answer is yes.
Sir, the online question from Aditya Vikram is saying, what is India's progress in green hydrogen and what green hydrogen vision India is going to present before the G20 science meeting in view of the UN appealing to the world that the global temperature is going to rise by 1.5 degrees Celsius?
So I am now actually in a true PSA role because this is really cutting across the whatever we were talking so far. Answer is green hydrogen mission, all of you know, has been launched on 4th January this year. So already the deliberations are on different verticals, and under S20 there is a clean energy for a greener future, which is going to happen in Agartala. So I'll be attending that meeting. That will be discussed there. So green hydrogen is not coming in our CSR meeting, but it is, so I think this is a good platform for me to amplify what Nagaraj ji said. We have avoided overlap of topics in these 3 science verticals, tracks. So we have avoided that, and we have made sure that we don't repeat ourselves without some substantial progress. But it will be discussed.
So the final question online from Rohan Sharma: what proposal India is taking on the G20 table regarding climate change and environment degradation?
So, so this is again, yeah.
Just to supplement, I think, all of these issues are being handled at other working groups. For example, we have a working group on sustainability that is being led by Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Then we also have the Energy Transition Working Group that is being led by Ministry of Power. For example, the green hydrogen is being taken up as a deliverable in the Energy Transition Working Group, whereas climate is, there are several aspects of climate. Climate finance is being dealt in the finance track, energy in the energy track, whereas the climate change as an issue is being dealt in the sustainability track. So there are several tracks which are addressing this.
So if Rohan Sharma is online, as sir says that it will be handled on sustainability track, and G20 is also a midway forum for India to present before the world for the 2030 SDG goals, that 17 goals which the world is aspiring to achieve. On that note, sir, we would like to thank Professor Ajay Sood, Dr. Maini, Dr. Naidu, and all media friends are requested to come to the 4th floor for high tea. And thank you very much for coming. And we'll be in touch, friends, and this PowerPoint will be shared within 10 minutes on the SNT groups. Thank you very much, sir.